She served him coffee every morning for 6 months. He was building a billion-naira tech company. She was studying engineering at night while working 3 jobs. But when a simple mix-up revealed her hidden genius, everything changed. How did a coffee order mistake lead to the biggest tech partnership in Lagos? Sit back and discover the story of how a waitress's brilliant mind caught the attention of Nigeria's youngest tech billionaire. In the heart of Victoria Island, Lagos stood a small but busy restaurant called Sunrise Cafe. Every morning before 7 a.m., the place buzzed with the energy of corporate workers, grabbing quick breakfasts before heading to their glass tower offices. Among the servers was a young woman named Ada. She was 23 years old, with bright eyes that seemed to notice everything. But she moved quietly, almost invisibly, between the tables. Ada had a routine that most people never paid attention to. She woke up at 4:30 a.m. every day. Not because she loved early mornings, but because that was the only way to fit everything into her life. By 5:30 a.m., she was at Sunrise Cafe, preparing for the morning rush. She served coffee, took orders, cleaned tables, and smiled at customers who rarely looked at her face. But Ada was different from what people saw. Hidden beneath her server's uniform was a mind that could solve mathematical problems most engineers struggled with. Every night after her restaurant shift, she would drive her small Toyota Corolla for Uber until 2 p.m. Then from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., she tutored secondary school students in mathematics and physics. And when the sun went down, Ada would sit in the back corner of the public library, studying advanced engineering concepts until midnight. Life had not been easy for Ada. When she was 16, her father, a secondary school teacher, fell seriously ill. The medical bills drained their family savings. Her mother, who sold fabrics in Balogun Market, could barely afford Ada's school fees. So Ada learned to work, she learned to hustle, she learned to dream quietly. One day, she would whisper to herself while walking home from the library, "My brain will take me places these hands cannot." She was determined to finish her engineering degree, but she was doing it the hard way, part-time at night while working 3 jobs during the day. It was exhausting, but Ada never complained. She had learned that complaining was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not far from Sunrise Cafe, in a sleek office building on Ahmadu Bello Way, lived a different world entirely. This was where Kemi Adebayo spent his days building what tech blogs were calling the next big thing in African fintech. At 29, Kemi was already being mentioned in the same breath as successful African tech entrepreneurs. His company, Payflow, was revolutionizing how small businesses in Nigeria handled digital payments. Kemi had returned to Lagos just 2 years ago after spending 7 years in Silicon Valley. He had worked at Google, then at a successful startup that got acquired for $200 million. The tech world knew him as brilliant, focused, and incredibly wealthy. But what people didn't know was that Kemi felt lost. In Silicon Valley, everything made sense. The culture, the language, the way business was done, he understood it all. But back in Lagos, Kemi felt like a stranger in his own country. He struggled with the relationship-based business culture. He didn't know how to navigate family expectations. He was brilliant with code and algorithms, but human connections felt like puzzles he couldn't solve. Every morning, Kemi would leave his high-rise apartment in Ikoyi and drive to his office. But first, he always stopped at Sunrise Cafe. Not because the coffee was exceptional, but because it was quiet, efficient, and nobody tried to have long conversations with him. He would order the same thing every day: black coffee, no sugar, and a croissant. He would sit at the same corner table, open his laptop, and work for exactly 45 minutes before heading to his office. For 6 months, this routine never changed. Kemi would walk in, nod at the servers, place his order, and disappear into his work. The servers knew him as the laptop guy, polite but distant, rich but lonely. And for 6 months, Ada served him without him really seeing her. She knew his order by heart. She knew he liked his coffee extra hot. She knew he always sat facing the window. She even knew he was left-handed because of how he positioned his laptop. But to Kemi, Ada was just a part of the background, like the soft jazz music or the morning sunlight streaming through the cafe windows, until one Tuesday morning in October when everything changed. That morning, Ada had been up until 3 a.m. working on a particularly difficult assignment for her digital signal processing class. Her professor had assigned a problem involving Fourier transforms and filter design, the kind of mathematical concept that made most students' heads spin. But Ada loved it. In the quiet library, surrounded by textbooks and her calculator, she had worked through the complex equations until she finally found the solution. She was exhausted when she got to work, but she felt the quiet satisfaction that came from solving a difficult problem. As she prepared for her shift, Ada didn't notice that she had absent-mindedly written some of her calculations on a napkin and stuffed it into her apron pocket. Kemi arrived at his usual time, 6:45 a.m. He looked tired too. He had been up late working on a machine learning algorithm for fraud detection. His company was preparing for a major investor presentation, and the pressure was getting to him. As he set up his laptop, he pulled out a napkin to clean his screen and started scribbling some notes about his algorithm. The morning rush was particularly busy that day. Ada moved quickly between tables, balancing multiple orders and trying to keep up with the demanding pace. When she approached Kemi's table with his coffee, she was thinking about her assignment, not paying full attention to what she was doing. "Your usual," she said, setting down the coffee and croissant. "Thank you," Kemi replied without looking up from his laptop. As Ada reached for the napkin on his table to wipe down the surface, her own napkin, the one with her Fourier transform calculations, fell out of her apron pocket and landed next to Kemi's laptop. Neither of them noticed the switch. Kemi continued working, occasionally glancing at what he thought was his own napkin with his algorithm notes. But as he looked closer, his eyebrows furrowed. The handwriting was different. Smaller, neater. And the mathematics. This wasn't his fraud detection algorithm. He picked up the napkin and studied it more carefully. What he saw made him sit back in his chair. Written in precise, elegant handwriting were complex equations for digital signal processing. But this wasn't just student work copied from a textbook. Someone had taken a standard filter design problem and solved it using an innovative approach that Kemi had only seen in advanced research papers. The mathematical reasoning was sophisticated, the solution elegant, and the method brilliant. Kemi looked around the cafe. Who could have written this? The other customers were typical morning commuters, bankers checking their phones, marketing executives reviewing presentations, a few students with basic notebooks. None of them looked like they could solve advanced engineering problems. His eyes stopped on Ada, who was taking an order at a nearby table. She was explaining something to a customer with the kind of patience that suggested she was used to dealing with difficult people. Could it be her? No, that seemed impossible. She was a waitress. But as Kemi watched Ada more carefully, he noticed things he had missed before. The way she quickly calculated change in her head without looking at the register. How she efficiently organized multiple orders without writing anything down. The fact that she wore a small calculator watch, unusual for someone in the service industry. When Ada came back to refill his coffee, Kemi made a decision that would change both their lives. "Excuse me," he said, looking up at her for the first time in 6 months of morning visits. Ada paused, slightly surprised. The laptop guy had never spoken to her beyond thank you and good morning. "Yes, sir," she replied politely. Kemi held up the napkin. "Is this yours?" Ada looked at the napkin and her eyes widened slightly. Those were definitely her calculations from the night before. How did he get them? I think there might have been a mix-up," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure her manager wasn't watching. "That fell from my apron." "You wrote this?" Kemi asked, his voice carrying a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. Ada felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. She had learned to hide her intelligence at work. Most people didn't understand why a waitress would be interested in advanced mathematics, and explaining usually led to uncomfortable questions about why she wasn't doing something better with her life. "I'm sorry if it distracted you from your work," she said, reaching for the napkin. "I was studying last night and I guess I—" "Wait," Kemi interrupted gently. "Can you tell me how you solved this filter design problem?" Ada looked around nervously. She had other tables to serve, and her manager, Mr. Olawale, was already giving her questioning looks from across the room. "I really should get back to work," she said. "Please," Kemi said, and something in his voice made her pause. "Just quickly, I'm genuinely curious about your approach." Ada glanced at her manager again, then made a quick decision. In a low voice, she briefly explained her solution method, using technical terms that most engineering students wouldn't have understood. As she spoke, Kemi's expression changed from curiosity to amazement. That's a really innovative approach," he said when she finished. "Where did you learn to think about signal processing like that?" "I'm an engineering student," Ada said simply, "part-time, at night." Before Kemi could ask more questions, Mr. Olawale's voice cut across the cafe. "Ada, table 7 is waiting for their order." "I have to go," Ada said quickly, tucking the napkin back into her apron. "Wait," Kemi called after her. "What's your name?" "Ada," she replied over her shoulder as she hurried toward table 7. Kemi sat back in his chair, staring at his laptop screen, but not really seeing it. His mind was racing. In 6 months of coming to this cafe, he had been completely wrong about one of the servers. Ada wasn't just a waitress, she was clearly a brilliant engineering mind disguised in a service industry uniform. For the rest of the morning, Kemi found himself watching Ada work. He noticed how efficiently she moved, how quickly she solved small problems, how she seemed to remember complicated orders without writing them down. There was a systematic, logical approach to everything she did that he recognized from the best engineers he had worked with. When Ada came to clear his table, Kemi was ready. "Ada," he said, "I'd like to talk to you more about your studies. When do you get off work?" Ada hesitated. In her experience, when customers wanted to talk after work, it usually meant something she wasn't interested in. "I'm very busy," she said diplomatically. "I have other jobs." "Other jobs?" Kemi asked. "I drive Uber and I tutor students," Ada explained, wiping down his table while talking. "After that, I go to evening classes." Kemi did quick mental math. If she worked at the cafe in the morning, drove Uber and tutored in the afternoon, and studied at night, when did she sleep? "That's a lot," he said. Ada shrugged. "It's what I need to do to pay for school." An idea was forming in Kemi's mind, a brilliant, hard-working engineering student who understood advanced concepts and was already juggling multiple responsibilities. Someone who thought creatively about problems and wasn't afraid of hard work. "Ada," he said carefully, "what if I told you I might have a proposition that could help with school expenses?" Ada stopped wiping and looked at him directly for the first time. "What kind of proposition?" "I run a tech company," Kemi said. "We're always looking for talented people. Would you be interested in hearing about a part-time opportunity?" Ada studied his face, trying to determine if this was genuine or just another version of the conversations she tried to avoid. "What kind of company?" she asked. "We build financial technology solutions," Kemi explained. "Mobile payments, fraud detection, business analytics, the kind of work that requires people who can think mathematically and solve complex problems." For a moment, Ada felt a spark of excitement. This was exactly the kind of work she dreamed about doing. But reality quickly set in. "Sir," she said politely, "I appreciate the offer, but I don't think you understand my situation. I need steady income. I can't afford to take risks on uncertain opportunities." "What if it wasn't uncertain?" Kemi asked. "What if I could offer you something that paid better than your current jobs and gave you experience in your field?" Ada was quiet for a moment, then shook her head. "People like me don't get opportunities like that. I'm just a waitress who studies at night. Tech companies hire people with proper degrees from proper schools, not someone like me." Something in her voice, a mixture of longing and resignation, hit Kemi harder than he expected. Here was someone with obvious talent accepting limitations that didn't need to exist. "Ada," he said gently, "what if you're wrong about that?" Before Ada could respond, Mr. Olawale appeared beside their table. "Ada, is this customer bothering you?" he asked, eyeing Kemi suspiciously. "No, sir, just taking his payment," Ada said quickly. Kemi paid his bill and left a generous tip, then stood to leave. "Think about what I said," he told Ada. "Talent is talent, regardless of where it comes from." As Kemi walked out of the cafe, Ada watched him go. Part of her wanted to run after him and say yes to whatever opportunity he was offering. But the practical part of her mind, the part that had learned to be careful about promises that seemed too good to be true, held her back. That afternoon, as Ada drove her Uber between trips, she couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. She found herself wondering what it would be like to work in tech, to use her engineering knowledge for real projects, to be around people who understood the kind of problems she loved solving. But she also remembered all the times people had told her she was too smart for service work, as if being smart was enough to magically change her circumstances. Intelligence didn't pay bills, dreams didn't cover school fees. Reality was working 3 jobs and studying until midnight and being grateful for steady income, even if it wasn't glamorous. That evening, at her tutoring session with a secondary school student named Emeka, Ada found herself distracted. "Miss Ada," Emeka said, "you seem different today. Did something happen?" Ada smiled. Emeka was one of her favorite students, bright, curious, and hard-working, despite coming from a family that couldn't afford expensive schools. "Just thinking about opportunities," she said. "Sometimes people offer you things that sound amazing, but you have to decide if they're real or just too good to be true." Emeka nodded seriously. "My father always says, be careful of gifts that come with hidden costs." "That's wise advice," Ada agreed. But as she helped Emeka work through calculus problems, Ada found herself thinking about the napkin incident from that morning. The tech CEO, she still didn't know his name, had seemed genuinely impressed by her solution method. And his offer hadn't felt like it came with hidden costs. It had felt like recognition. Later that night, at the library, Ada tried to focus on her studies. She was working on a project about machine learning applications in telecommunications, but her mind kept drifting to the conversation at the cafe. What if he was serious? What if there really was an opportunity to use her engineering knowledge in a real company? What if she was being too cautious, letting fear disguise itself as practicality? Ada pulled out her phone and did something she rarely allowed herself to do. She searched for information about tech companies on Victoria Island. One name kept appearing in articles about Nigerian fintech startups, Payflow, and when she clicked on the company's website, she saw a familiar face in the leadership section. Kemi Adebayo, CEO and co-founder, Stanford computer science graduate, former Google engineer, the laptop guy from Sunrise Cafe. Ada stared at the screen. This wasn't just some businessman making casual conversation. This was someone who actually built the kind of technology she studied. Someone who understood the mathematics she loved. Someone who might genuinely recognize talent when he saw it. For the first time in months, Ada allowed herself to imagine a different future. Instead of serving coffee and driving Uber and tutoring students, what if she could work on real engineering problems? What if her solution to that filter design problem wasn't just homework, but could be part of actual projects that helped people? But even as excitement built in her chest, doubt crept in. Why would someone like Kemi Adebayo want to hire someone like her? She had no professional experience, no impressive resume, no connections in the tech industry. She was just a part-time student who happened to be good at mathematics. As Ada packed up her books and prepared to head home, she made a decision. Tomorrow morning, she would go to work as usual. She would serve coffee and take orders and clean tables. But if the tech CEO came in again, she would ask him more about his offer. Not because she was ready to say yes, but because she was finally ready to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to know what was possible. What Ada didn't know was that across the city, Kemi was having his own restless night. He couldn't stop thinking about the waitress who solved advanced engineering problems on napkins. In all his years in Silicon Valley, surrounded by brilliant engineers and successful entrepreneurs, he had rarely met someone who impressed him as much as Ada had in their brief conversation. The next morning, Kemi arrived at Sunrise Cafe earlier than usual. He had spent most of the night thinking about how to approach Ada with a genuine offer that wouldn't sound patronizing or suspicious. He respected her caution. It showed intelligence and experience with the real world. When Ada saw him walk in, her heart beat a little faster. She had rehearsed what she wanted to say, but now that the moment was here, she felt nervous. "Your usual?" she asked as he sat at his corner table. "Actually," Kemi said, "I was hoping we could talk more about yesterday's conversation. When you have a break." Ada looked around the cafe. It was still early, and the morning rush wouldn't start for another 20 minutes. "I have a few minutes now," she said, sitting down across from him. "First," Kemi said, "I want to apologize if I seemed presumptuous yesterday. I realize you don't know anything about me, and my offer probably sounded suspicious." "I looked you up," Ada admitted. "Payflow, Stanford, Google." "Impressive," Kemi smiled. "So you know I'm legitimate." I know you're successful, Ada said, but I still don't understand why you'd want to hire someone like me. Someone like you? Kemi repeated. Ada, in 6 months of coming here, I've never met anyone who could solve the kind of problem you had on that napkin. Do you know how rare that kind of mathematical intuition is? Ada shrugged. Smart people are everywhere. Most of them just have better opportunities than I do. Maybe, Kemi said, but I'm offering you an opportunity now. Part-time, flexible hours, working on real engineering problems. The kind of work that would complement your studies and give you experience in your field. What's the catch? Ada asked. No catch, Kemi said. Well, except that you'd be working with me, and I'm told I can be demanding when it comes to technical excellence. For the first time in the conversation, Ada smiled. I'm used to demanding. I tutor teenagers. As they talked more, Ada found herself relaxing. Kemi wasn't trying to rescue her or change her life. He was simply recognizing her abilities and offering her a chance to use them. It felt different from pity or charity. It felt like respect. Can I think about it? Ada asked. Of course, Kemi said, but don't take too long. I have a feeling you're exactly what my team needs, and I'd hate for someone else to discover your talent first. As Ada walked back to work, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope mixed with possibility. For the first time since starting her night school program, she could imagine a path that didn't require her to work 3 jobs just to survive her education. But what she didn't know was that accepting Kemi's offer would lead to challenges she couldn't imagine. Her family's expectations, his family's doubts, and the complex dynamics of 2 very different worlds coming together would test both of them in ways that had nothing to do with algorithms or engineering problems. The story was just beginning. Ada stood at the crossroads of everything she had worked for and everything she had dreamed of. A simple coffee order mistake had revealed her hidden genius to Nigeria's youngest tech billionaire. But would accepting his offer change her life for the better, or would the differences in their worlds create obstacles she never saw coming? What happens when a brilliant waitress steps into the complex world of high-tech business and family expectations? Stay tuned for part 2 to discover how a napkin full of equations became the foundation for Nigeria's most unexpected love story and business partnership. What would you do in Ada's situation? Would you take the risk or play it safe? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story and want to see how Ada's journey unfolds, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll be the first to know when part 2 drops. There's so much more to discover about Ada and Kemi's story, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next.